They said I couldn't afford to attend the family reunion. Then, I bought the resort. My name is Marlo Densley. Not Marlene, not Marilyn. Marlo. Like the poet, like the detective. It's the kind of name that sticks in people's minds, but somehow my family never bothered to remember it. Or maybe they chose not to. The thing you should know before anything else is this. I wasn't supposed to be born into wealth. That's what my Uncle Richard used to say with his brandy-glazed tongue at Christmas dinners. Sweet girl, but she's got the wrong wiring. Too soft. Won't make it past 30 with that spine. They'd all chuckle. Aunt Helen would sip her wine and look down her nose, as though I was some threadbare stain on an otherwise polished tablecloth. It started with a message, a group text. Denley Reunion. Tree Eagle. July 16 through 22. Eagle Crest Mountain Lodge. Hey fam, time to RSVP. We're doing the reunion big this year. Private chefs, ATV rides, lakefront cabins, golf, and more. RSVP by May 15. Room shares required unless you opt to pay the premium. Payment deadline June 1. No exceptions. Underneath, a PDF with lodging fees. 7 days, nearly $2,800 per person, plus activity add-ons. Premium private suite agreed? An additional $1,200. A dozen of them replied instantly. Fire emojis, champagne glasses. I scrolled. My name was there, buried between cousins I hadn't seen in half a decade. No direct message. No warm, hope you can make it. Just the cold formality of a group list. The last time they saw me, I was a receptionist in a dental office. That was before the layoff, before I sold my car, my couch, my grandmother's china set to pay rent, before the sleepless nights stitching together a living from freelance scraps. I hadn't been on a vacation in 8 years. Now, they were hosting the family gathering at a mountaintop luxury resort. For days, I stared at the invitation. Room shares required, unless you opt to pay the premium. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the assumption. They never imagined I'd even be in a position to choose. That night, I opened 3 browser tabs. Eagle Crest's official site, my bank account, my business dashboard for Densley Digital Consulting, LLC. They didn't know about the business. Not one of them. They didn't know that I'd gone from microwaving instant noodles to managing corporate rebrands worth millions, all from my apartment. The lodge's page showed the property was reserved by Densley Family Trust. But a red warning read, "Event ownership contract not finalized." I called the lodge. Janice, the event manager, confirmed it. The trust had a lease for mid-July, but hadn't purchased the property. And yes, it was still for sale. 2 weeks later, after a flurry of lawyers, signatures, and wire transfers, Eagle Crest Mountain Lodge belonged to me. I didn't cancel the reunion. I let them arrive in blissful ignorance. When they checked in, they'd find a welcome envelope. Welcome to Eagle Crest Mountain Lodge. Proudly owned by Marlo Densley. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you.
Dawn lifted over Eagle Crest like a soft breath warming cold glass. The lodge roof still wore a sugared edge of frost even in July, and the lake below, a silver oval cupped by dark firs, held the sky without a ripple. I stood at the main entrance under the cedar porte-cochere and pressed my palm to one of the load-bearing beams. The wood was old, scarred with the blunt hieroglyphs of storms. It didn't yield. Neither would I. Janice met me at the doors with her clipboard and a coffee the color of walnut shell. "You slept?" she asked, which was more courtesy than question. The answer was on my face. "Like a sentry," I said. "How's our morning?" She flipped a page. Chef finished the sourdough rolls at 5, the pastry team is on the lemon crullers, housekeeping placed the welcome envelopes on every nightstand and the group itineraries in every cabin. ATV maintenance complete, golf carts charged, pool tested, dock cleared and roped. Mr. Garrity, grounds, wants to show you the terrace planters before the guests arrive. Oh, and the print shop delivered your signs. Good. I inhaled, feeling the pine resin sting my sinuses. Keep my name off everything public until I say otherwise. The reveal happens when it happens. Janice smiled in a way that she had been waiting for this day too. You sure you want to be in the lobby when they check in? I want to be everywhere, I said, but start me here. We walked the lobby once more, though I knew every knot in the wood already. High rafters crossed like the ribs of a ship. A chandelier of wrought iron and glass cones spilled a warm amber down the center. Stone hearth 8 feet wide with a mantel you could lay a canoe across. The desk was a crescent of black walnut, polished to a shine you could shave in. Behind it, Theo arranged keycard folders with a zealot's meadness. "Morning, boss," he said softly when he saw me. Then, catching himself, he shifted to neutral. We were still pretending for the world. "Morning," I answered, and tipped my chin at the small white boxes stacked near the bell. Each carried a ribbon and a stamped wax seal. Marlo Densley, Eagle Crest owner, read the crisp black type beneath the logo. "Those are for the banquet tables. Not yet." Theo pressed his lips together to keep from grinning. Understood. I walked toward the picture window that framed the lake and the mountains beyond, sloped spines and layered blue. Overhead, a bald eagle scribbled a thin arc and vanished into the tree line. I thought of the name on the group text. Denley Reunion, all caps. That missing S in the surname, that half-wrong version we'd all endured because Uncle Richard thought it looked cleaner on his cufflinks. They wore the family story like a suit they had tailored to fit themselves. Today, the stitches would begin to pop. In the back corridor, Chef Miguel was shelling peas with the efficiency of a man who measured time in dinner services, not hours. He wore a white jacket blotched with the green of herbs and the gold of butter. "You're early," he said, not looking up. "So are you. Bread waits for no one." He pointed his knife at a chalkboard where welcome dinner menu was scrolled. Pan-seared steelhead from the river, charred lemon and herb beurre blanc, roasted fingerlings with rosemary, charred broccolini with shaved almond, sourdough with cultured butter, a peach galette that made my knees want to bend in prayer. "You sure about the seating?" "Mixed tables. They always sit in their factions. I want them talking across lines." "You're making my life interesting." He set down the knife and met my eyes. "Are you ready for the noise of this? Not the cooking, the family." I grew up fluent in that noise. I'm ready to answer it in a different key. Outside, the first resort shuttle rolled up the drive, tires whispering over wet gravel. My pulse did something foolish against my ribs. Janice's radio popped. "Front gate, first arrivals." I moved to the left of the desk, half in shadow, my hair tucked beneath a navy cap I'd borrowed from housekeeping. The cap cast a clean line of shade across my eyes. Not hiding, just observing. They came in as a weather system does, in clusters, loud in their own air. Rolling suitcases, hard shells, and designer finishes. Laughter tuned to be heard by others, athletic wear that had never seen sweat. That first wave was Aunt Helen's branch, her son Crispin and his wife Blythe, their twins in matching whale print pullovers. Crispin had that airplane-tanned forehead you only get from constant first-class windows, and he wore a smile that never knew the weight of a bill. "Oh, look at this place," Blythe floated, and even her voice had expensive veneers. "Isn't it just aspirational?" Theo smiled in his practiced way. "Welcome to Eagle Crest. May I have your last name?" "Den-lay," Crispin said, giving the extra beat to the wrong version like it came with a trademark. "We've got the family reunion." "Of course." Theo's fingers flew. "We have you in Lakeview Deluxe 204, Miss Blythe. Mr. Crispin, you'll be in Lakeview Deluxe 205, adjoining door. Here are your keys. We'll need a card for incidentals." Crispin gave a half laugh. "Put it on the trust card." He turned to talk to Blythe mid-sentence. He didn't see Theo's polite tilt of the head. "I'm sorry," Theo said. "We'll need a card in your name for incidentals. The lodging is covered by the group contract, of course." Blythe produced a rose gold card with a sigh that suggested she was offering a relic to a museum. "Don't let him near the minibar," she whispered, loud enough for the twins to hear. Everyone laughed except for Crispin, who did a little flourish with his shoulders like he liked it when jokes broke across his body. Behind them, more arrivals filled the door. Aunt Lenora with her quietly critical eyes, Cousin Tamsin, the one who used to borrow my blouses without asking and return them with the shape of her perfume soaked into the threads, Dorian, hedge fund, jaw clenched like a permanent posture. A sprawl of second cousins whose names I remembered in full but had learned to keep inside my skull like a secret. And then the man who built the myth and fed it daily, Uncle Richard. Tan even here where the son had not found a lobby, a watch on his wrist that could type more money than I'd seen at 22. He clapped his hand on the stone of the fireplace and said, not to anyone in particular, "Now this is a lodge." Something brittle moved under my heel, like ice cracking over deep water. I could feel the 12-year-old in me twist to look for cover. I made her stay. She wasn't driving anymore. Richard came to the desk in a surge of cologne and expectation. "Reservation for Densley Family Trust," he said as if reciting a court decision. "Richard Denley." "Welcome to Eagle Crest, Mr. Denley," Theo replied, not correcting the missing S. "We have the Pine Summit suite for you and Mrs. Denley." "Helen's still outside shouting at a suitcase," he said, not looking back. "We'll need early access to the conference room for the family meeting at 3. We'll also require golf tea times of 12 at 9 tomorrow, and the chef to accommodate shellfish allergies, gluten sensitivity, and," he waved a hand, "preferences. You'll want to charge that to the trust." "The meeting space is confirmed," Janice said, stepping forward, with a general manager's smile that matched a general's awareness of troop movement. "I've already set aside the projector and a wireless mic. Chef has your dietary notes and a buffet planned for today's lunch on the terrace. Here are your keys, your week's itinerary, and a map of the grounds. Incidentals will be charged to personal cards." Richard blinked slowly, like a cat receiving new information and deciding how to absorb it. "We have a trust card on file." "We do," Janice said, unraffled. "It covers contracted items, rooms, meeting space included activities, incidentals, bar tabs, spa services, retail, go to individuals." Richard swung his attention to Theo. "We can make an exception." Theo smiled deep into millimeter. "We can't, but I can add a cash limit to your incidentals if you like." A vein rose like a small river along Richard's temple, then smoothed. "Fine," he said, sliding a card across the desk. "Make it simple." Keys were distributed. Hugs constellated the room. Some found me and bounced off the cap and the shade of my neutrality. "Have we met?" a second cousin asked kindly, and I heard in her voice the simple human thing that had starved inside our family climate. Curiosity without angle. I'm new to the area," I said, and she nodded before being tugged to a photo opportunity by 2 aunts with matching blowouts. By 11, the lobby smelled like perfume and the good kind of money, the kind that buys fresh lemon in the water jugs and flowers for stairway landings. Soft bags thumped into elevators. Kids flowed toward the game room where an elk head watched placidly from his permanent winter. And then it began, the way rumors always start here, with a photo. "Babe," Blythe's voice swang from the mezzanine, "what is this?"
She held an opened welcome envelope, the wax seal broken clean. I watched her read the card, her glossed mouth shaping each syllable. "Welcome to Eagle Crest Mountain Lodge, proudly owned by," the last 2 words slipped into the air like a knife into fabric. "Marlo Densley." She looked over the railing. "Who is that?" The words slid across the marble floor and found my shoes. "Some kind of joke," Crispin said, already hunting for an attentive ear to receive his offense. "Richard." Uncle Richard had drifted to the giant window, taking a call at a volume meant for men who believed the air was theirs to carve. He pressed the phone to his ear with 2 fingers and did not turn. "I'm at the lodge," he said into his call. "Looks adequate. We'll have the deal done by Q4. No, I don't care what they want for the cabins. We're not here to buy fairy tales." Janice walked toward Blythe with the confidence of someone who had practiced this dozens of times in the mirror. "Is everything all right with your room?" Blythe held out the card like it might stain her. "This says the lodge is owned by I don't even know who that is. Is this a boutique brand?" "It's exactly what it says. Ms. Densley is the owner." She didn't look at me. She was a cathedral of discretion. Blythe's gaze tightened as her math failed to add. "Is this the same Marlo as the poor one?" Tamsin supplied brightly from behind her. My cousin's hair was the same expensive honey I remembered, but the tone was sugared with a sting. "Oh, come on, we're all thinking it." A silence sharpened, the way air does before glass breaks. Theo adjusted a stack of key packets by a millimeter. "If you need anything, press 0 from your room," he said to no one in particular. "We're here to make your stay exceptional." The group chat exploded. I could feel it from 30 feet away, the electric thrum of 100 thumbs striking 100 screens, a century-old family name alloying with my first name in a tinny, incredulous chorus. "I thought she worked at a dental office. Wait, is she here? LOL, this has to be a prank. Lo, the receptionist? Richard, sort this out. Someone ask where she got the money? Scam?" I stepped back from the desk and let the sound wash through me. I had imagined this moment 100 different ways: triumph, vindication, the slow satisfaction of a stone finally grinding meal into meal. It felt simple and oddly soft, like setting down a bag you've carried far too long and realizing your hands still remember the shape of the lift. I wasn't there to gloat. I was there to observe, to learn who they were when the mirror turned. Janice's radio clicked. "Dock ready. Terrace lunch staging in 10. "Copy," she said, and turned to me with a question in her eyebrows. "Let them settle," I said. "Lunch at 12. I'll be at the terrace. I want a table near the railing. And tonight, I watched my family in small scenes, the way Aunt Lenora fluffed the lemon slices in the water jug with her fingers and then scolded a server for not using tongs, the way Dorian squeezed his wife's shoulder in a pattern that said he'd turn every conversation into a contest he could win. The twins darted from the elevators and collided with the elk's glassy stare and decided to love him. "Tonight," I said, "I'll say hello." We kept the terrace airy, white cloths, simple wildflowers, the lake a bright sheet below us. The scent of rosemary rode the breeze, tusk sharp. Lunch threaded the family into a single fabric for an hour. Even Richard laughed, a sound like a door scraping a threshold. He had a martini in the posture of a man convinced, smoothing the napkin across his knee set history in order. I took a table at the far corner with a view of everything. Janice kept servers moving like choreography, and Miguel sent out plates that made small reverent noises rise from throats. It's hard to sharpen a knife while your mouth is full of grace. Halfway through the steelhead, I felt the wheel turn. People began to compare notes. Someone had opened the little white box at our table and lifted the card with 2 fingers like a rare insect. They passed it around. "It's her," I heard. "It's really her." Helen arrived late, brisk and flushed with indignation that didn't dampen in the mountain air. "Richard," she said as if she'd found him in a failing hospital. "What is this about the notes in the rooms?" He didn't look toward me, not yet. He had not erred my face. "Nonsense," he said, though he had seen the note. "It was on letterpress," she said. "You don't joke in letterpress." Across the table, Tamsin leaned back and took a picture of the view, catching my reflection in the glass. She looked from her phone to me and back again, recognition sliding into place not on my name but on my posture. She saw how she calculated. She remembered precisely who I had been to her closets and her convenience, but not who I might be now. I finished my fish and set my fork on the far side of the plate, a tiny, old habit from a line of women who believed civility was a discipline, not a costume. When Janice approached my table with coffee, she placed it with a small incline of the head that seemed to say, "When you're ready." I was and I wasn't. After lunch, the ATV guides gathered a contingent near the trailhead. Kids clustered around the s'more station. A knot of men argued amiably over club selection by the putting green. I walked the flagstone path that circled the terrace and let my fingers brush the tops of the white flowers. Bees rehearsed their busy liturgy inside the blossoms. The world did what it always did. Continued. "Excuse me," a voice said behind me. Not the voice I had been expecting, not Richard's. Softer, older. I turned to find Aunt Agnes standing. Hands clasped like a question she didn't know how to ask. She wasn't an aunt by blood. She had married my grandfather's brother. She had never cut me with her tongue, but she had not stopped the bleeding either. "Marlo," she said. She pronounced my name correctly, always had. "Is it you?" "It's me." She looked down at her hands. "I thought of you when I saw the note. I remembered that winter you crocheted little hats for everyone. And Helen laughed that the colors were wrong for her complexion, and you said you could make another one if she wanted one. You were so sweet then. I hope you aren't anymore." I felt something loosen inside my chest. "I'm not," I said, "but I'm not cruel either." "No," she said and patted my arm. "You never were." From the upper walkway came the click of a shoe that cost more than a month of rent back when rent mattered like that to me. Helen arrived late, brisk and flushed with indignation that didn't dampen in the mountain air. "Richard," she said as if she'd found him in a failing hospital. "What is this about the notes in the rooms?" He didn't look toward me, not yet. He had not earned my face. "Nonsense," he said, though he had seen the note. "It was on letterpress," she said. "You don't joke in letterpress." "Our course strong. This got the doors back to the 20s happier." She often accompanied me with the task and that habit to perfection. She adjusted her features into kindness. "We're so happy for you." I let the sentence stand in the air without touching it. "Your suite is comfortable," she said, "but the bathtub is too modern. I like a proper clawfoot, and the pillows are very environmental." She made environmental sound like a rash. "But of course, we won't complain." "Thank you," I said. "We're always open to feedback." Her smile faltered. She wasn't used to hearing hospitality's last sentence in a voice that belonged to the person who made the decisions. She studied me, measuring what power looked like when it wore the face of the girl who used to collect plates after dinner without being asked. "We'll see you at dinner," she said finally. "Richard will say a few words, then perhaps you can say something as well." She waved a hand, pained at the idea of me doing anything in front of other people that might change the air. "Keep it brief. I'll be as long as I need to, but I'm glad there will be words." She left a wake of perfume in which I caught something powdery like lavender bruised in a lady's book. Janice found me at the railing. "We had a call from a Mr. Anders asking to speak with the general manager. He says he represents the Densley Family Trust. Let him speak with me, but not until 4, and take a message." "Yes, ma'am." She hesitated. "They'll push." That's how they prove to themselves they exist. It's fine.
At 3, the conference room hummed with the exact sound of a hive being shaken. A slide with the word welcome glared on the wall. Richard had his jacket off and his sleeves rolled with manicured soldierliness. A whiteboard bore a list of activities no one would remember past the 3rd bullet. He didn't look at me when I came in. He had found an audience, and he fed it the way he fed everything, like a fire. And, of course, tomorrow we'll have the golf tournament, he was saying. Teams will be drawn at breakfast. Some of you will be with me, some with Dorian. Losers buy the first round at the bar. Laughter. I want us to focus this week on legacy, on what it means to be a Den-Li. He gave the wrong name the right weight, and it landed like currency. We have opportunities coming up in Q4 that will require the family's attention, and I want to ensure our brand stays consistent. We're in conversations about a media property. Richard, Lenora said from the second row, closed-lipped, the children. We'll edit. He smiled at a nephew as if he were a camera. Point is, this week isn't just about s'mores. It's about vision. We do things properly. He lifted his chin toward the ceiling, toward the rafters, toward everything that had ever been above his head and therefore under his jurisdiction. This resort is the kind of place we deserve. He paused just long enough for the room to notice he had said resort as if it were an acquisition and not a gift. Any questions before we break? He asked. A hand rose. Not one of the faithful. Agnes. Is it true that Marlowe owns the resort? She asked in her careful voice. The air moved in a small animal way. Richard's smile stayed, a mask that had been tightened by another man at a fitting. No. There was a misunderstanding at check-in. I've spoken to management. I spoke to management, I said, and the chairs turned toward my voice like flowers toward the sun. I hadn't planned it. The sentence walked itself into the room and took a seat. Richard looked at me as if I had been smuggled in a suitcase. He said, "We're in the middle of a session. We'll address housekeeping later." I'm not housekeeping. I'm the owner. The word broke like a thin piece of ice, and you could hear the river under it all along. He laughed. It came out short and eager to be longer. He said, "We're not doing this. Not here." "We're doing it wherever you tell a lie out loud," I said. And there it was. The spine they said I didn't have. Taller than his shoulders, older than his watch. The room divided itself along lines that had existed before any of us were born. Those who waited to see which way the strongest man leaned. Those who could not imagine a world where I had done anything by myself. And those who had never underestimated me because they had never bothered to see me. Agnes's mouth made a tender, astonished "oh." The twins leaned in like it was a story. Richard adjusted his cuff, touching the smooth gleam of his watch face the way some men touch a talisman. "This is a family meeting," he said. "We're not putting our," he gestured vaguely in my direction, "personal dramas on the agenda. This resort is under contract with the Densleigh Family Trust. We paid for it. We planned this week. It is ours." "You leased it," I said. "You rented it like any other guest. Then I bought it." Murmurs. The auditory texture of an opinion being shaped on a lathe. "Prove it," Tamsin said, chin dipped to make her lashes look longer even now. "Happy to," I said. "But we have dinner at 7, and I don't want to keep Chef waiting. For today, all you need to know is this. Your reservation stands. Your activities stand. Your comforts stand. You are my guests. You will be treated with the hospitality I learned from women who made do with less than this and did it with grace. But the era where you speak my life into smallness is over." I left before the applause could organize itself into an allegiance. I didn't need it. I wanted the quiet of the hallway where the mountain air drifts through the venting and the carpet holds silence the way a forest floor does. Janice waited outside with a phone and a look. "Mr. Anders again," she said. "Do you want to take it?" "Put him through," I said. "Ms. Densleigh, good afternoon. I represent the Densleigh Family Trust. My client has some concerns regarding your communications to guests. What would you like to say?" "The notes in the rooms are misleading," he said. "They suggest a relationship between you and the trust that does not exist. My client would prefer you refrain from using the Densleigh name in any materials
and that you remove any mention of ownership during the trust's contracted event. My name is Densley, spelled with an S. I own the property. I announced a fact. A pause long enough to fit a sigh. We'll be sending over a letter this afternoon, he said. It outlines our position in more detail. I look forward to reading it. And ended the call. Janice shifted her weight. The welcome dinner's at 7, she said. You still want to welcome them? I do. And I brought something for dessert. At 6:30, the lake turned the color of a ripe plum. Lights winked on along the boardwalk. The pavilion, cedar beams, river stone pillars, wore white lights that looked like a string of captured constellations. Tables glowed. Glasses lined up like disciplined soldiers, their rims chalk quiet on linen. Miguel sent out the sourdough and the butter and a scent of rosemary that made memories sit up. The seats filled with Denleys, who had never learned how to arrive anywhere as anything but an event. They arranged themselves around the view as if the mountains might work as a backdrop to their lives. Richard stood, cleared his throat into a mic that had been trained to flatter. Family, he said, lowering his voice to the register of gravitas. We are gathered in a place worthy of our name. We are here because we have built something that matters. This lodge, he spread his hand as if to pat the beams, is the beginning of a new tradition. He looked toward me once, quickly, like checking a weather app. There was some confusion earlier about ownership. Let me settle it. The Densley Family Trust has oversight of this event, and we will ensure it stays up to our standards. Enjoy your evening. He smiled the way people smile at mirrors. They have trained to show them only certain angles. And tomorrow, we golf. Applause, dutiful as a metronome. Janice nodded to me from the side of the pavilion. My cue. I stood. My heartbeat settled into something sturdy, like a drum at the center of a procession. I took the mic and the light softened the edges of faces into a single luminous field. Welcome, I said. You know my last name. Some of you remember my first. I'm Marlowe. I own Eagle Crest Mountain. I'm glad you're here. I let the sentence do its work. It didn't need frosting. I bought this place because I loved it, because the first time I came up the drive and smelled the lake and the hot stone, holding the day's heat and the sour sweet of the pine pitch, I felt a peace I couldn't find anywhere else. I bought it because I wanted a place where ordinary people could feel extraordinary for a weekend, where families who didn't have trusts could feel inherited by the land. I bought it because no one handed me anything, and I learned that building a door is sometimes the only way to get into the room. I heard a chair scrape with impatience somewhere near Richard. I didn't look. You are my guests, I said. You will be taken care of. Tomorrow, if you want, I'll show you the ridge trail that most people miss because they don't believe the map's tiny dotted line means anything. For tonight, eat, drink, be generous with each other. It costs less than you think. A hush that wasn't silence at all, but attention, finally, gathered at the base of my words. I gestured toward the dessert table, where Leela, our pastry lead, was waiting with a cake that cost me an hour of sleep last night to choose. It was simple. Vanilla sponge, lemon curd, a thin white coat, and on top, in dark chocolate script, the truth we were eating all day. Welcome home. I almost made it to the cake before the headlights swept the gravel like a searchlight at sea. A black SUV rolled to a stop at the edge of the pavilion. A man stepped out in a suit that made no noise. He carried a thin leather folder and the weary urgency of someone who had been told to ruin a party quickly and cleanly. Ms. Densley, he said too loudly for the quiet we had nurtured. He was a process server, but he moved like a maitre d' at a lawyer's banquet. I have documents for you. My family turned as one body, scenting blood where there had only been sugar. Richard's face took on the shine he got when a deal left a bruise on someone else. The man held out the envelope. The temporary weight of paper holds worlds. I took it. Please confirm receipt, he said, and I signed his tablet with a hand that didn't shake. Richard's smile reappeared like a small theater's lights coming back up. What is it, Marlowe? He called, the way some men call fetch. I slid my thumb under the flap,
cut it neat. The first page wore a title heavy enough to bruise: Notice of Pending Action and Claim to Enforce Right of First Refusal. Below it, the words that reach into a deed and close a fist around it: Lice Pendens. My eyes tracked the names: Densley Family Trust, by and through its trustee, Richard Denley. A case number, a docketing date, today, 3 hours ago, a judge's signature on a temporary order to maintain the status quo pending hearing. Across the pavilion, Richard lifted his glass in a small toast to himself. The last line of the order caught the light like a fish turning in deep water. Defendant owner is enjoined from transferring, encumbering, or otherwise altering any interest in the property known as Eagle Crest Mountain Lodge until the hearing date set for Monday at 9 a.m. The lake seemed to nod, a slow, dark assent to trouble. I looked up at my family, at the people who had taught me the exact weight of a cheap laugh and the price tag on a grace denied. I folded the paper once, twice, and set it next to the cake where the chocolate letters shone. Dinner is served, I said. Richard's laughter rode the blue air. Enjoy it while you can, he said, not quiet now, greedy to be heard, because by Monday, this place is ours. The pavilion held its breath. The eagle that had circled the lake in the morning drew a black line across the last of the light. I smiled like a blade sheathed for one more minute and lifted the knife above the cake. And when steel met icing, a voice behind me said, not a question, not a plea, but a verdict. Marlo, you need to see page 4.
Marlo, you need to see page 4. The voice belonged to Janice, steady as a metronome tapped against my pulse. The knife hovered above the cake, its blade catching a tremor of light. I laid it down gently on the linen and turned. The process server lingered in the shadow like a punctuation mark. His work done, his presence still altering the sentence. Leela, sweet Leela, held her breath as if sugar work could crack from sound alone. Page 4, Janice repeated, lower now, meant for me alone. The attachment list. I carried the envelope to the edge of the pavilion where the lights gave me a clean square of glow. The night smelled of pine resin and lemon curd. Paper, when it matters, has its own temperature. I could feel the cold of it through my skin. The first page was the order itself, temporary, as these things always are, but weighted like a thumb on a scale. Page 2, service details. Page 3, a schedule referencing exhibits. Then page 4, exhibits incorporated by reference. I skimmed down past A, property legal description, and B, deed reference, and stopped at C, memorandum of right of first refusal recorded as instrument number 2019-148311, County of Clallam, in favor of Denley Family Trust. Denley, not Densley. I read it twice, the wrongness of the letter like grit in a tooth. My family had always mispronounced our name as if the sound of their money demanded it. The misspelling had always felt like an aesthetic choice. This was different. This was a legal instrument with the wrong letter sitting like a fat, permanent thumbprint in the county records. Janice's finger hovered near the line without touching it. I didn't see this in escrow. Did you? I said, no, but I was given a Schedule B exceptions list in the title policy. I could feel the old training kick in, the emergency calm I cultivated on client calls when million-dollar ads hiccuped at launch. Laughter rose from the far tables, oblivious, an entire weather system of mirth that belonged to another planet. Richard's chuckle rode the current like a gull. Let's move to the office, I told Janice. Leela, serve the cake, make it look like nothing's wrong. Nothing is, she said in a chant meant for courage, and lifted the knife with the shoulders of a ballerina who had drilled this movement since childhood. The back office smelled like fresh printer toner and the citrus cleaner we used for the desk. Theo met us at the door with a stack of check-in forms and a face that asked questions without taking time away from the answers we needed. Close the door, I said. The click of it felt like drawing a curtain. I spread the documents under the desk lamp. The thin shadow of the paper's edge cut across the wood like a horizon line. "We need the title packet," I told Janice. "The Alta policy and the final title search." She was already dialing. "Cascade title. This is Eaglecrest. We need a copy of the owner's policy for the Whitcomb to Densley transfer. Instrument number," she paused, eyes on me, 2025-07315. Numbers are a kind of prayer when you need them to be. Theo set a glass of water beside my hand. "The bar is fine," he said. "Crispin tried to order a round and put it on the trust. Sophie handled it." He blinked and paid. "Good," I said, and the word felt like a sparrow that had flown from my lungs. On speaker, the title officer's voice came honeyed and stiff with professionalism. "We have the owner's policy under your name, Ms. Densley, issued last Tuesday at 1:34 p.m. Schedule B, Part 2, lists exceptions. Standard taxes, easements, CCRs. I do not see a recorded memorandum of right of first refusal." "I said there's a list pendant citing one," I tapped page 4. "Instrument 2019-148311. Can you pull it?" "Give me a moment." Clicks, the sound of someone tugging at the webbing of the county records. While we waited, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't know. "You look good in power, Marlowe. Please don't ruin dinner. R." I deleted it without answering. He needed an audience. I preferred mirrors that didn't applaud. The line came back alive. "Found it," the title officer said. "Instrument confirms a memorandum of right of first refusal in favor of Denley Family Trust," note the spelling, "and it references Eaglecrest Mountain Lodge with legal description tied to parcel 14072310. However, I repeated like an incantation, "it appears to have been recorded without an underlying agreement attached. There's a reference to option agreement dated July 2nd, 2019, but the option agreement itself isn't recorded. Also, there is a gap, no evidence of annual fee or exercise terms. Most critically, the memorandum lists the grantor as Whitcomb Holdings LLC, but in 2019, the owner of record was Whitcomb Hospitality Partners LLC, different entity." Janice raised her eyebrows. Theo let out the smallest of breaths. "Is the instrument acknowledged? Notarized?" I asked. "It is, but the notary block uses a stamp that expired in August 2018. A pause that was almost a smile. "Which might explain why our examiner didn't include it. Our system flags facial defects. It's sloppy." "So the list pendants leans on a defective instrument?" "It appears that way," he said. "We'll tender this to our claims counsel. Your policy includes coverage for defensive title against unrecorded ROFRs and improper claims. Send everything, email, text, carrier pigeon." "I'll be your pigeon," he said, warmed now by the possibility of competence appreciated. I ended the call and looked at Janice. This is what their page 4 is built on. A memo with a wrong name, using an entity that didn't own the dirt, stamped by a notary with an expired commission. She exhaled a quiet laugh. "We should print t-shirts." "Not yet." I traced my finger along the line of type. The anger that rose in me wasn't hot, it was clear. They weren't trying to win on the merits. They were trying to exhaust me with the theater of certainty. They'll ride this into Monday and hope the first impression sticks. Theo's radio crackled. "Front desk, be advised, Mr. Denley is directing guests to the conference room after dessert." "Of course he is. We'll be there first." We walked back to the pavilion with our faces composed and our hearts laced tight. The cake was already sliced. The script, "Welcome Home," divided into edible syllables carried on china plates. McGill's crew moved like a string quartet, each motion tuned to the others, everything harmonious. That was the thing they didn't understand about service. It wasn't servile, it was orchestral. Children darted between tables with frosting mouths and the kind of joy that doesn't care whose name is on the deed. Agnes waved me over, pressing a napkin-wrapped slice of galette into my hand like a sacrament. "You looked calm," she said. "That scares people like him."
I didn't feel calm, I said. Swallow of pastry turned my voice butter thick. You don't have to feel it, she said. You just have to be it. On cue, Richard clapped twice, crisp as coins. Conference room, 10 minutes, we'll keep it short and sweet. The flock stirred. Chair squeaked. You could see the storyline assemble itself in their heads, the patriarch calling the family to the table to fix the mess the girl had made. I let them walk ahead. Janice fell in beside me like a second heartbeat. She want me to set the projector? I want the lights up and the windows open. We're not doing shadows. The conference room glowed with the last of the day. I stood near the whiteboard, no slides, no sustainers of attention, except a voice that had finally grown into its bones. The crowd filtered in. Richard positioned himself at the head as if furniture could be trained to recognize rank. Helen arranged programs on a table that didn't need programs. I waited until the room settled into that collective hush that means people have forgotten their phones. Before we begin, I said, I want to say what tonight is not. This is not a board meeting. This is not a tribunal. This is a family reunion at a resort I own, purchased in a fair sale with clear title. There is a legal dispute you've been told about. It's temporary, and it will be resolved with facts, not volume. Richard smiled, a smile with teeth. Sweetheart, you're out of your depth. This isn't an Instagram caption. There are real mechanics at play. He gestured, and a man stepped forward from the back. A lawyer type, sharp suit, expression tuned to, I wish I were billing more for this. Perhaps Anders, perhaps another. He held a sheaf of papers like a priest holds a book. We have filed to enforce our client's right of first refusal, a right recorded in 2019. The court has temporarily enjoined the owner from making changes pending a hearing. We expect that hearing to result in either a compelled sale to our client on the same terms, or at least injunctive relief limiting the current owner's ability to trade on the property's reputation.
I let him speak. The room needed to watch the performance to know it was a performance. When he finished, I nodded. Thank you. Now here are the facts we will present Monday. The so-called memorandum cites a trust spelled D-E-N-L-Y. Our family name is D-E-N-S-L-E-Y. The memo references an option agreement that doesn't appear in the county records. The notary stamp was expired more than a year before the memo's recording date. The grantor entity is wrong. The title company examined and insured the chain without exception for that memorandum. And the Whitcombs, the sellers, will testify that no valid ROFR existed at the time of sale. The law has a term for filings like this. Richard's eyes gleamed. Winning? Abusive process, I said. A rustle went through the seats, the dry sound of opinions turning pages. Tamsin crossed her arms, her bracelets making a bright insect noise. This is so tacky, she said. You're making a scene. I'm making a record, I said. Scenes are what happen when people are bored. Records are what happen when people care what's true. Richard glanced at his lawyer. We'll see you Monday, he said, spreading magnanimity like butter he hadn't churned. For now, let's not spoil the week. He stood, dismissing the gathering like he was sweeping crumbs from a table. People began to rise by reflex. Wait, Agnes said suddenly, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. Everyone turned to her like a compass needle blessed back to true north. Richard, you will not demean her in her own house. Silence. Helen's mouth made a small rosebud of offense. It's my house, Richard said lightly. It's her deed, Agnes replied. She looked at me then, her eyes glass clear. What do you need, child? I hadn't let that word land anywhere near me for years. Child carries with it both diminishment and shelter. Tonight, it arrived as a quilt draped over the shoulders of a soldier between battles. I need you to enjoy your week, I said. I need you to tip the staff and pick up your towels and talk to each other kindly. I need you to let the lawyers do the lawyering. And I need you to stop calling me sweetheart. I looked at Richard when I said it. He lifted his palms in mock surrender. As you wish, Marlowe.
He pronounced it like he was paying the syllables in a currency he'd distrusted. People began to leave the room. I stayed until the last of them had drifted into the hall and the hum of chatter had smeared into something benign. Then I sat in a chair at the back and let my shoulders fall like a curtain after a final bow. Janice took the seat beside me, silent. Theo set a cup of tea at my elbow without comment. Outside the window, the mountains slid into night. One by one, the lodge's windows became stars. My phone buzzed. An email from the title officer. Subject: Claim opened, Denley memo. I forwarded it to Rhea Klein, my lawyer, who had the kind of mind that could peel an orange with a legal citation. Then I typed, urgent, please review. We will need a Monday morning war room. Rhea replied 3 minutes later, which is to say she had been expecting me. On it, she wrote. Call me when you can speak freely. Walk with me, I told Janice. Theo, you have the desk? He nodded. For the night. We cut through the service corridor where the air smelled like warm bread and bleach. Miguel leaned in the doorway of the kitchen, arms folded, face open. We're sending late-night cocoa to the fire pits. You want one? I want 10, I said, and smiled when he handed me a paper cup. Tell your team they were flawless. He inclined his head. Flawless is cheaper than petty. We can afford it. We stepped onto the back veranda where the boards kept the day's heat like a held breath. Down by the lake, the flicker of fire pits looked like low constellations had fallen to earth. A soft buzz of conversation rose and fell, big stories told small for the sake of a child's ears, old hurts folded into jokes just enough to make them survivable. Rhea answered on the second ring. Tell me everything, she said. New York clipped into a sword. I gave her the summary, process server, page 4, the defective memo, the lease pendants. We have title defense, I finished. Cascade is on it. Good. Our play is simple. Move to dissolve the temporary restraining order on grounds of defective underlying instrument and failure to show likelihood of success on the merits. Ask for sanctions for bad faith filing. We'll need affidavits. Whitcomb on the absence of ROFR, title officer on the examination, notary expert on the stamp issue, and our own declaration. Do not engage them directly. Do not post about it. Do not so much as breathe the word sale near a public line. I won't, I said. Operationally, can we proceed as planned this week? Yes. The order only restricts transfer or encumbrance. You can host your guests and run your business. Just don't sign any new contracts over a certain threshold or open any new bank accounts in the property's name until we clear it. I'll send a list. Thank you. The words were small at the end of a day this big, but they were true. And Marlo, her voice softened by 1 millimeter. Be careful. They'll try to get in your head. Men like him prefer the hallway to the courtroom. I have staff in the hallway. They're better than any bailiff. We ended the call. Janice was looking at the water, the way you watch a singer hit the note that makes your skin ripple. You did well, she said. So did you. I blew across the surface of the cocoa and tasted childhood minus the innocence. Tomorrow we keep it boring. I'll believe it when I see it, she said. It wasn't yet 11 when the first unboring thing arrived. Security radio. Front gate. Clallam County Fire Marshal. Janice's eyebrows climbed. At this hour? Let's greet them, I said, already moving. The cocoa went untouched on the railing, as if leaving an offering for calmer gods. We met the fire marshal under the porte cochere. He wore a navy jacket with reflective piping, and a jaw that had been doing this job long enough to lose any romance about sirens. A second inspector stood beside him, carrying a clipboard too thick for comfort. Good evening, he said. Marshal Everett. We received multiple complaints regarding fireworks and illegal open flames on the lakeshore. We have permitted fire pits, no fireworks. We don't allow them on property. He nodded, not yet convinced by anything except what his eyes could inventory. We're going to conduct an unannounced inspection of your life safety systems. Alarms, sprinklers, exits. You're within our jurisdiction. Immediate hazard findings can result in a temporary closure of affected areas. I felt the weight of the week shift toward a new fulcrum. Of course, I said. We'll accompany you. We began in the lobby, the chandeliers buzzing gently like contented insects. Everett moved with a methodical grace, checking pull stations, reset panels, emergency exit lighting. His partner took photos of illuminated exit signs, code-compliant and patient. We opened mechanical rooms and hallway junction boxes. We tested alarms, they screamed, I apologized to guests, and offered earplugs and midnight brownies as penance. We climbed to the third floor, where corridors stretched like quiet time. In the West Wing service closet, Everett paused. He pointed to the red valve wheel on the riser. "When did you last have your sprinkler system certified?" "June," Janice said, flipping through her tablet. "June 11th, here's the report." He glanced at it. "Everything was in order then?" "Yes," I said. "We brought the system up to spec before closing." He crouched, feeling along the pipe like a doctor taking a pulse. "There's a smell," he said. I inhaled. Metal, dust, the faint ghost of bleach, and something else, like old pennies warmed in a hand. "Standing water," Everett said. His partner shone a flashlight into the cabinet at the base of the riser. The light licked across a shallow pool. "Your floor drain here is blocked. Looks like sediment backflow from the line." He looked up at me. "Not an immediate closure, but it needs correction. If this overflows, you'll have corrosion at the base. Corrosion at the base becomes a leak under pressure. A leak under pressure becomes my problem and yours. We'll snake it tonight," I said. "I'll get Garrity." We moved on. In the kitchen, they checked hood suppression systems. Miguel's team was watching with the intensity usually reserved for watching a souffle rise. On the lower level, Everett tested the pull on a back exit. The door resisted. 60 years of paint had made it stubborn. "That's a fail," he said, not unkindly. "Exit doors must open with one motion and no special knowledge. Get a scraper and make friends with your hinges." "We're on it," Janice said, already messaging maintenance. We passed through the game room where the Elks stared forever over a landscape of foosball. The inspector bent to check the power strip behind the console. "No daisy chains," he said. "This is fine." At the boathouse, Everett examined the propane store for the grills. "Locked and ventilated," he said. "Good." He looked out at the lake's unruffled dark. "If you keep people away from the water after 11, we'll have fewer retrievals at 2.
"We will," I said. "Thank you for coming." He made a note on his clipboard. "One more thing. We had a complaint about your fire alarm panel being in test mode earlier today." "It was," Theo said from behind us. He had joined quietly. "We tested the alarms during a scheduled maintenance window while the lobby was empty." "Good," Everett said. He closed the clipboard. "Correct the drain, free the hinge. I'll note you as cooperative. Next time, Fireworks Comp," he almost smiled, "you can direct your family to the public beach a mile down. It has a permit." When they left, I watched the SUV taillights disappear beyond the pines. The night seemed to inhale again, muscles released from a brace. "They're throwing rocks at the windows to see which ones break," Janice said. "Let them," I said. "We'll open them in the morning and let in the light." By midnight, the fire pits had burned into red bowls of heat. The twins had fallen asleep with sticky fingers and dreams scented like smoke. Housekeeping moved through the hallways with the quiet step of monks. I toured the grounds like a woman blessing a new house with salt. On the boardwalk, I found Garrity crouched by the service drain, forearms gleaming. "It's a clog of mineral and hair and some stubborn leaf matter," he said cheerfully. "But I've had worse in my bathtub." He barked a laugh that made the lake accept us as locals. "Give me 20 minutes and a promise of pie." "You get 2 slices, with whipped cream." Back inside, the spa glowed low. I stood in the doorway watching the quiet water of the plunge pool hold a perfect square of ceiling light. Calm is a set piece you have to reset over and over. My phone buzzed again. Another text from an unknown. "Hear you had visitors. Don't blow it. R." I blocked the number. If he wanted to rattle the panes, he'd have to throw something heavier than a message. Upstairs, I paused at the third-floor landing. A framed black and white photograph of the lodge under snow hung there. Taken in the 60s, when the world wore different shoes but still left the same prints. In the glass, my face layered over the past. A palimpsest I hadn't asked for but claimed anyway. When I turned, Agnes was there. She moved like careful music. "You should sleep," she said. "So should you," I replied. She smiled.
I like walking halls at night. You learn who a house is when its daylight guests have gone quiet. She tilted her head toward the photograph. That was the winter your mother broke her wrist skating. She tried to hide it from Helen so she wouldn't have to listen to the lecture. I felt the line of memory like a thread tugged, gentle, not yet pulling me backward. Where did she skate? On the inlet beyond the pines, she said. You can't see it from the lodge. You'd have to go looking. We stood a moment in that long corridor. Agnes, I said, thank you for speaking up earlier. She said, truth needs escorts, not just travelers. Back in my suite, the new owner smell had faded, replaced by something like belonging. I set my phone face down on the bedside cable. The ceiling was a dark map where the faint hum of the vent traced a coastline. Sleep came not as a wave, but as a treaty. You can give them at the course, I said. Not in the lobby, and not with that name. He smiled, showing a row of teeth that had always been expensive. We're building a brand, he said. Something to remember this place by when we own it next week. You're free to build your brand on your merchandise, I said. You are not free to rename my property. If you hand those out here, I'll confiscate them for trademark infringement and have our security escort you off the course. His eyes sparked, thrilled by the friction. Big words, he said softly. Careful you don't scuff them on the gravel. Careful you don't trip on your ego, I said just as softly. It's bigger than your backswing. Dorian coughed a laugh into his sleeve. Richard cut him a look that shaved the sound off. Enjoy your game, I said, and turned away before he could script the next line for me. The day moved like a well-oiled machine. Small squeaks, occasional hisses, everything more or less functioning toward grace. I walked rooms with housekeeping, admiring the tight corners on hospital folds, the alignment of remotes parallel to table edges, the tucked note that said, "We're glad you're here," and handwriting that belonged to a real woman with rent and a mother and a stubborn car. At noon, I led the Ridge picnic hike, half a dozen cousins and 3 kids who held walking sticks like wizard staves. The path wound through fir and hemlock that smelled like good decisions. At the overlook, the lake lay below us like a coin in a green purse. I passed out sandwiches wrapped in butcher paper and cookies that crumbled in a happy way. Tamsin came because even pettiness likes a view. She kept 20 paces behind, pretending to be on an important call with someone who apologized to her a lot. At the top, she stood a little apart, staring at the far mountains like she could buy them if she learned their first names. Remember when you borrowed my black wrap dress and never returned it? I said, not unkindly. She started, then rolled her eyes. Is this about a dress? It's about inventory. You always thought everything was a closet you could raid. She laughed. You were sweet then. She looked at me. You still are under there. I'm kind. That's different. We stood silently until the kids' laughter carried us back down the hill. Back at the lodge, the golfers returned sun-flared and smug. Richard had won his foursome by the simple trick of not counting 2 shots he'd promised to count later. That's how he'd won everything, with the math of memory. Afternoons sank into the soft moss of evening. The terrace wore a table of charcuterie like a crown. Someone tuned a guitar by the fire pit and played a song without words. The lake flipped a fish and caught it again. Janice approached with a folder. From Rhea, filed. The judge scheduled us for 9 a.m. Monday as planned, but added a note, defendant may continue normal operations in ordinary course. She smiled. He reads. Good, I said. The words tasted like a wholesome bread. We were halfway through an outdoor movie. Kids sprawled on blankets, adults on Adirondacks, flickering light stitching community, when Garrity trotted up from the dock. He had the look of a man who had found a snake and was trying to decide whether to be frightened. Boat, he said, unmarked, no lights, pulled into our slip for 5 minutes, then left. 2 guys. One took pictures of the boathouse electrical. Might be nothing. Might be nothing means might be something, but my mouth can't afford to say it yet.
Call Everett. Log it. From now on, security every hour on the hour at the docks until dawn. You got it. Miguel appeared with a tray of popcorn as if he had become the god I had been praying to all day. I took a handful, the salt waking every nerve like a map of home.
Outside, the slam rattled the hasp like teeth chattering in a sudden cold. Dust leapt from the rafters, a faint glittering snow in the yellow cone of the bulb. I steadied the green binder against my ribs and felt my pulse knock once, twice, then decide to keep time instead of panic. "Marlowe," Richard said through the door, voice damped by the wood and the fireproof insulation. "Open this. You and I will end this farce without humiliating everyone." Humiliating everyone, in his lexicon, meant humiliating him. I glanced at the small, high window, his shape blurred, behind the wired glass, broad shoulders, expensive fury, a second, thinner shadow just behind, Dorian probably, or one of the cousins who liked to be near heat. "You're trespassing in a secured maintenance area after hours," I said, keeping my tone level as if reading off the safety placard on the wall. "Leave now or I call the sheriff." He laughed once, a short, metallic sound. "Don't be theatrical. Or family. You don't call the police on family." "That's exactly who people call," I said, "when family stops behaving like family." Another slam. The door jumped, but the deadbolt held, a line of stubborn metal doing its quiet job. Outside, gravel ground under a pivoting foot. "Dorian," Richard said aside, not bothering to lower his voice. "Give me the bar." A new weight found the door, a crowbar testing the latch. The steel squealed. I took 3 steps back, binder tucked under my arm, phone in my hand now, camera up. If they breached, the record would show who did it. I wasn't interested in winning stories anymore, only in winning facts. I hit the speed dial I had programmed after Everett left. Security, Garrity. The line clicked, and I didn't waste time on names. "Shed," I said. "Now. Bring sheriff's number if you beat them here." "On my way," he said, already breathing a little harder. Richard's third slam wasn't bravado, it was calculation. He knew the weak points of things because he had spent his life testing them. The frame shuddered. A flake of old paint lifted and drifted down, aiming for my cheek and missing. "Stop," I said. Not because I expected him to, but because the record would hear me say it. "You're making this worse." "It's already worse. You made it worse the minute you decided to play mogul with a property you don't legally own. Page 4, darling." He let the endearment curdle in his mouth and drip through the crack like grease. Footfalls pounded across the lot. Garrity's silhouette filled the window. Back away from the door, he barked, "Now." "Who are you?" Richard asked, affronted by an authority he hadn't contracted. "Head of grounds," Garrity said. "And the man whose shed you'll be replacing if you keep ramming it. Also the man dialing the sheriff." The click of his radio was satisfying. "Dispatch, this is Eagle Crest. We have attempted forced entry into a secured facilities area by a guest, requesting a unit." "We're not guests," Richard snapped. "We're the owners by Monday." "Then you'll be able to pay the repair bill," Garrity said pleasantly. There was a rustle of clothing, a small, whispered counsel, Dorian probably advising optics. Richard's footsteps retreated one pace, then another. Power doesn't like to be seen sweating. "Open the door, Miss Densley," he called, finally, voice smoother, public. "Let's be reasonable. I will open this door when the sheriff is present, and when you are on the other side of the gravel." A low curse, swallowed, then the sound of expensive shoes turning towards the lodge. "Stay put," Garrity said. "I'll wait until they're clear." I breathed. The bulb hummed. The binder's edge cut a faint line into my forearm where I held it too tight. "Clear,"
Garrity said after a moment. Keys jingled. He cracked the door and slipped inside, shutting it fast behind him. In the yellow light, his eyebrows did what eyebrows do when they've seen more than they were promised. They climbed. That was Denley himself. Denley, I said from reflex. We both smiled, a small release valve. Let me walk you back, he said. Wait. I opened the binder again, slid the ROF from its plastic sleeve, and held it up. Look. He bent, eyes narrowing. That stamp's dead, he said at once. Had to renew mine last year. I remember the cutoff. And that datum, that parcel number is old. My nephew works in county mapping. They renumbered this whole area. He pointed at the signature. And that flourish is wrong. He does it there. He tapped where the tail of the R in Richard should have flicked, not here. Thank you, I said softly, to the world for providing me men who fixed things and saw things and told the truth like it was a wrench that kept oiled. We locked the shed and crossed the lot. The stars were sharp as fresh nails. A patrol car turned into the drive, headlights stitching the gravel with pale thread. A young deputy stepped out, poised between wanting to be helpful and not wanting to be part of a family war. We gave him the facts. He wrote a report. He asked if I wanted to press charges. Not tonight. Please log the incident. We have a hearing Monday. When he left, the property exhaled. We walked back to the lodge through a night that belonged to the lake and the pines and us. I didn't sleep long. The muscles along my spine held a memory of the door's flex and refused to unclench. At 5, I gave up. Coffee. Balcony. The mountains wore the first pink, like a pulse returning to a cold hand. In the staff room, I debriefed. We had an attempted entry at the maintenance shed. The sheriff took a report. No one is to open secured spaces to anyone with a key and a face you know. If confronted, call security. No heroics. Sophie raised her hand. What if they tried the kitchen? Miguel's smile didn't reach his eyes. They can try, he said, but we sharpen knives here. Small laughter. It mattered. I sent the ROF photos to Ray and Dev with a subject line that felt like the right kind of trumpet. More defects. Ray's reply came back before the email had even emotionally left my outbox. Good. Preserve original. We'll subpoena the binder. Do not let it out of your sight. I took her literally. The green binder didn't leave my hand for the next hour as I walked the morning rounds like a queen with a scepter that looked like office supplies. By 8, the lobby filled with the warm noise of breakfast. Richard held court near the fireplace, the way men do who think furniture is a supporting actor. He laughed too loud at something Tamsin said to show he could. He looked up when I passed. Our eyes met, and there was nothing in his expression but calculation and the faintest fragrance of surprise, that I hadn't folded, that the sheriff had a report, that the door had held. Good morning, owner, he said, putting quotes around the word with his intonation. Good morning, guest, I returned the favor. He turned to his audience to translate. People laughed. Guests always laugh when the loudest person tells them what to feel. I took a table near the window, with Agnes and, unexpectedly, Owen, the cousin from the dock, the one with the daughter whose life jacket had been too big. She wanted to sit with you. He jerked a thumb towards the pastry case where his daughter weighed the soul of a croissant against the righteousness of a muffin. You're less scary than the rest. How unfortunate for me, I said dryly, and he barked a laugh that broke something stale in my chest. Agnes buttered toast like performing a rite. The police came last night, she said matter-of-factly. Good. Good, I agreed. Richard told people you overreacted, she said, but I've seen men knock down doors. Before, they pretend they're rescuing you from a fire when they lit the match. She sipped her tea. Careful on the stairs today. He'll be in a mood. Noted. I looked at Owen. Are you actually going to the golf thing again? Can't, he said. My kid wants to kayak. I go where the real power is. He tilted his chin toward the pastry case. Besides, I don't like shouting. Me neither, I said, but I'm getting good at letting it past me. Janice appeared at my shoulder like an answer to a prayer I hadn't yet formed. Rhea on line 1. Also, the fire marshal sent a note he's impressed with the corrected drain and hinge.
He also said he'll be in the area today if we need him.
Tell him the coco's on us if he stops by. I took the call in the office. 2 things, Rhea said, voice the legal equivalent of a scalpel. 1. We filed the motion to dissolve and the motion to expunge. The judge set a brief telephonic status conference for 2 this afternoon. He may want to scold someone. My money's on Richard. 2. I need you to preserve the shed binder with chain of custody. Sign and date a page noting where found, by whom, and when. Bag the ROFR in an acid-free sleeve and put it in the resort safe until I send a courier. Done, I said. Also, attempted forced entry last night. Sheriff took a report. Good. Send me the report number. Paper loves other paper. And, Marlo? Yes. She said, proud of you. Don't let him colonize your breathing. I hung up, feeling 2 inches taller in all the places a tape measure cannot reach.
I breathed. The afternoon bent toward gold. Children shrieked at the dock in the good way. Miguel recovered his equilibrium with a tray of lemon bars so bright the sun blushed. I made a round of the cabanas and found Agnes under a wide hat, reading a paperback with the cover folded back like a secret. "You looked like yourself on that call," she said, without looking up. "I did," I said. "I felt like myself, too." "Hold on to that." She turned a page. "It's easy to misplace it in noise." At 4:30, I took the green binder to the safe, logged it with chain of custody forms that made my teenage self, who worked retail and learned receipts were religion, proud. I slid it inside and turned the wheel. There is a particular comfort in the thunk of a safe engaging. Not power, just stewardship. At 5, the first cracks appeared in the day's varnish. Sophie hurried from the lobby, cheeks flushed. "Reporters," she said. 2 of them. One with a camera, one with questions designed to look like compliments. "Who tipped them?" Janice asked the air, but we all knew. "I'll handle it," I said. I changed into a jacket that made my shoulders look like decisions and walked into the lobby with the serenity of a person who knows where her exits are. "Ms. Densley," the woman from the paper lifted her hand. She wore the smile of a person trying to look like a friend while holding a pen designed for knives. "Quick comment. Is it true this resort was purchased using funds from an offshore entity connected to a hedge operation with ties to—" "No," I said. "And we're not discussing family matters during a private event. This is a closed property. You are trespassing. Please leave." "We're on a public path," she countered, nodding toward the 20 feet of flagstone technically outside the lodge's envelope. "You're blocking ingress to a private business," I said. "You have your shot. Now move." There's a trick to these encounters. You don't give them anger, because anger is content. You give them stone. After 30 seconds of stone, she realized she wouldn't get anything that a copy desk could work with. She pivoted, snapped a few shots of Richard, who had placed himself in her frame like a product next to a celebrity, and left. "Crisis averted," Janice murmured. "Deferred," I said. "We'll draft a statement when the piece runs. 1 sentence, no fuel." "On it." She took notes as if taking notes was the way she dieted from worry. Dusk folded its clean napkin over the day. The terrace tables wore candles that ticked like small hearts. Leela's team built a Sunday bar that would make saints weep. We had earned the sweetness. Just as I reached for the first scoop to hand to a boy with eyes like the sky under a storm, the lights went out. Not a flicker, not a brown-out sigh. Dark. The kind that makes every human sound stop mid-syllable. A second later, the emergency paths lit blue along the floor, quiet and insufficient as moonlight. A child whimpered. Someone laughed the way people laugh when they're sure it's not serious. "Generator," Janice said, already moving. We stepped through the staff door into the corridor. The faint hum that underpins a working building, compressors, fans, circulation, had vanished. The air, suddenly, was not moving. "Garrity?" I called into the radio. "I'm at the panel," he said, breath tight. "Main feed's cut. It's not a grid issue. Generator should have kicked in. It's not. It's been tampered with." The word dropped like a wrench in an empty hall. "Can you restore?" "I can try, but not fast. Someone pulled the starter relay and bridged a sensor. It's deliberate." "Evacuate the indoor spaces," I said to Janice. "Flashlights to staff, candlelight protocol for terrace. Keep the tone calm." "And the kitchen?" Miguel asked from the doorway, face composed but eyes sparking. "Gas off until we're certain. Cold service only. We can feed 100 on charcuterie and resolve." He nodded once, commander to commander. I walked back onto the terrace, my voice already deployed. "We've had a power interruption," I said, smile steady, "and we're going to make it beautiful." Leela lit candles as if she had been waiting her whole life for an excuse. Sophie passed out fleece blankets. Someone started an acoustic guitar. The night stepped in close and waited to see if we would let it bite. We didn't. Behind the facade, we worked. Garrity at the generator, Janice on head count, Theo logging vulnerable guests, elderly, asthma, infants, and checking on them. One hand on a railing, one on a shoulder. Anchor after anchor. 10 minutes in, my phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number again. No, not unknown. A new number. Same rhythm. "You can't run a lodge in the dark. Think of the children. Sell to us and we can restore order. -R." I typed nothing. I took a candle. I carried it to the table where the smallest twin sat with a lip trembling like a wire. I set the candle down and let him see his own face steady in the small light. He steadied. "Stories?" Agnes said, rising like a queen with a book. "I have a story." She didn't, but she had lived long enough to know that tone is a bridge. She began, and within 3 sentences the fear had somewhere to go that wasn't the body. Garrity came up the stairs, grease on his forearms like war paint. He shook his head once. "It'll be an hour," he said low, "if I had the relay. But I don't." "Find me a relay," I said. "He'll find it if the county store's open. If not," he looked toward the mountains as if they had answers behind their blue, "we'll manage." "I will manage," I said. "Add lanterns to the docks. No one near the boathouse. Extra patrols. We're attractive in the dark." Janice's radio crackled. "Smoke alarm, mechanical room B. No heat signature. Repeat, no heat but smoke detected." We froze for a breath and then moved in a single organism, staff flowing down the hall toward mechanical B. Everett's card in my pocket felt suddenly like a talisman. We opened the door to gray, smoke, thin but real, breathing up from somewhere low. "Kill the rumors," I said. "Find the source." Garrity coughed once, eyes watering. "It's not fire," he said. He bent, hand finding heat in the grating. "It's a smoke canister. Someone popped one in the vent intake." Sabotage again. The word has weight even when you don't speak it. I pictured Richard's face and set it aside. I would sooner dignify a mosquito with a portrait. "Ventilate," I said. "Open the north access. Fans only." We cleared it. We wet-wiped every surface like the world had sneezed ash. We reset the panel. We returned to the terrace smelling faintly of a bonfire we hadn't chosen. The judge's clerk called at 6:27, voice distant, officious. "Order granting motion to dissolve TRO will be on the docket within an hour. The court will take the expungement under advisement until Monday, but notes serious deficiencies on the face of the lease pendants. Parties are admonished to refrain from further theatrics." "Thank you," I said. The words were thin and strong as piano wire. I walked to Richard. "The temporary restraining order is dissolved," I said. "You don't own my evenings." He smiled as if someone had just reminded him he had a mouth. "Enjoy your darkness," he said. I opened my hand. The candle flame between us barely moved. "I will," I said. "We know how to live without pretending the sun shines out of us." We made it almost a full night, improvising grace. The sky piled stars and dishfuls. Children slept under blankets that smelled like other people's laundry. The lake flipped its silver coin and kept it. At 7:53, the generator kicked. Not the way a machine returns gently after a nap, but the way a heart seizes and then decides to work again. Lights flickered, hums returned,
the building breathed. A cheer went up from the south lawn, ragged and honest. I let myself smile, the kind that has edges but doesn't cut. Then the sprinklers and the ballroom exploded. It started with a hiss, like 1,000 snakes taking a first letter of a threat. Then a rain hammered the empty dance floor, sudden and absolute, as if a weather system had been installed indoors. Water sheeted from the ceiling, cascaded down the drapes, pooled and spread with the hungry efficiency of a tide. "Shut off," Janice shouted, sprinting. We ran. Garrity hit the riser. The valve turned but slow. The older sections don't like to be hurried. The pump whined, outraged. Water kept falling and found door thresholds, marched under. We squeegeed like farmers fighting a river with brooms. In the doorway, I saw him. Not Richard, Dorian. Pale, stricken. I told him this was too far, he said. His voice broke on the last word. It had to reach a place inside him that wasn't wearing his suit yet. I told him. Did he do this? I asked, without stopping my body's war against water. He hired a guy. He said a false alarm would make you look incompetent. I thought it was just the smoke thing. I didn't know he'd mess with the system. Go, I said. Get out of this room. He backed away as if a wave had shoved him. The water finally thinned to a steady indignation and then stopped. Silence returned awkwardly, like a friend who left mid-conversation and came back pretending they hadn't. We stood in a wet that would require every towel we owned and several we would have to invent. Miguel appeared with mops. Of course he did, because feeding people and saving them from floods are the same vocation if you do it right. I wiped my face with my sleeve, looked up at the mangled sprinkler head, and felt something in me settled to a denser gravity. He was going to break things until something inside him felt whole. The math had never worked. It wasn't going to start now. We clean, we document, we bill. We moved. We made a rhythm, squeegee, towel, bucket. Garrity pried the warped head from the pipe and bagged it like evidence. Janice logged the time to the minute. Theo took statements from staff. Sophie shepherded guests like a saint with a clipboard. When the room was merely damp instead of drowning, I stepped outside into the night that smelled of wet linen and iron. My phone rang. No name on the screen. I answered. A voice I hadn't heard in 3 years came through, calm as an operating room. Marlo? I closed my eyes. Dad. I've seen the Muse, he said, and my body remembered the sound of drawers shutting, of him packing, of him leaving. I think you need guidance. I think that you're out of your depth. For a moment, the world narrowed to a thread. My lungs found it and walked it like a bridge. I think he needs a new definition of depth, I said, very quietly. Silence. The lake breathed. Somewhere a loon called the way longing does when it knows it is singing for itself. I'm driving up, he said. I'll be there by morning. We should talk. I looked at the lodge, lit again, dripping like a cathedral after a baptism. I thought about the binder in the safe, the judge's order on its way to the docket, the staff who had stood like a wall that refused to learn the word fall. All right, I said. Come. He exhaled, and the sound carried both relief and a fear I recognized too well. I'll see you at dawn. The call ended. I put my phone in my pocket and steadied myself against the railing. From the far dark of the parking lot, headlights swept once and vanished. On the water, the lanterns flickered as if a hand had passed over them. Then the radio on my hip cracked with 3 words from Garrity that moved my body before my mind caught up. Owner's safe, open. I ran.
The corridor hit my legs like a river against a bridge piling. The office door was open, light pooling onto the hall carpet in a weak rectangle. Janice stood just inside with her hand on the jamb, not touching anything with her fingers because she had the religion of chain of custody stitched into her bones. The keypad went from red to green, she said, without prefacing. Steady even now. No one entered the code. Theo saw it on his way past. The handle was already turned. I crossed the room in 2 strides and stopped 1 breath away from the safe. The heavy door, old school steel, combination dial with a newer digital retrofit, hung ajar, the hinge complaining quietly as the building's air moved. Inside, the top shelf was bare except for the shallow groove where the green binder had sat. My heart kicked, then settled. The binder was there, moved lower, sitting crosswise on a second shelf. Not where I had left it, but not gone. "Don't touch," I said, and then laughed once at myself. "Except we have to." I slid on the pair of nitrile gloves from the drawer and lifted the binder. Its weight was right, its spine was cracked. The vendor and legacy agreements label looked at me with its sad Times New someone who doesn't care face. The ROFR sleeve was still inside, plastic fogged from decades of humidity and drama. Garrity leaned over my shoulder, eyes doing that scan only men who fix things have. He pointed with his chin to the floor. "Look." On the rug, just inside the door, a dark smudge, curved in an arc. Grease? No. Graphite, like the ghost from a locksmith's pencil had kissed the fibers. Next to it, the tiniest chip of clear plastic lay as if exhausted. The wing of a broken security tag, the kind electricians use to keep track of relays. Theo slid his tablet onto the desk, screens already divided. Camera feeds, access logs, power reports. Lobby and hall feeds cut at the outage, but the office camera was on its own UPS. The lens is vintage and stubborn. It didn't blink. Playing back now. We watched in silence. At 7:53 p.m., the screen showed the office as I had left it. Neat, binder was safe, safe locked. At 7:54, the power hiccuped, the lights snapped dead, the emergency strips came up. 34 seconds later, the door opened a fraction and a hand slid through, gloved, dark. The person stayed outside the frame and felt for the motion sensor with familiarity, then reversed, as if knowing not to trip it. The camera was cheap. It caught silhouettes and habits, not cheekbones. The hand reappeared with a flashlight trimmed with a hood to narrow the beam. The light licked across the panel behind the desk, the one that hid the manual lockout for the office alarm. I inherited the panel from Whitcomb's and never used it. The hand flipped the tiny switch. The office sensor blinked dumb and went to sleep. A minute later, the door opened fully. A figure stepped in, baseball cap, collar up, a posture I could not place. Not Richard, too lean. Not Dorian, too quick. The person moved straight to the safe as if their feet had memorized the path from a dozen daytime errands. They didn't spin the dial. They didn't press the keypad. They reached up and popped the faceplate off the digital retrofit with a practiced flick, a hidden pinch latch. The retrofit panel hung like a jaw. The person pulled something from a pocket, thin as a hotel room key, thicker than a credit card. They slotted it in, left it for 10 seconds, removed it, then reseated the panel and gently turned the handle. The safe door swung open. "Default override," Garrity breathed. "Some retrofits have a factory backdoor if the battery dies and you need to recover access. Only a fool leaves it active." "Or a previous owner," I said. "Nora didn't cheap out, but she delegated." The intruder lifted the binder, checked the first sleeve, then the second. They paused on the ROFR, held it to the light. I could see, clear as the moon, their gloved thumb hesitate over the notary stamp. For a moment, the room's silence felt like prayer. Then, surprisingly, they slid the ROFR back into the sleeve, put the binder on the lower shelf, and, this was what made my scalp prickle, reached into their jacket and pulled out a different binder. Black, sleek, no label. They opened it, rifled pages, removed a single document, and tucked it into their pocket. The black binder went back under their arm, and they closed the safe without locking it and left the room exactly as they had found it, except for the small mercy of their mistake, leaving the door ajar. "Freeze," Theo said, stabbed pause, magnified, rewound the throw of the cap's brim. The shadow cut across the face, the features stayed elusive. But the hands told a story. Long fingers, a small tattoo on the second knuckle, 2 parallel lines. Janice and I looked at each other. "Staff?" she whispered. "No," I said, "but a cousin has that tattoo." My mouth tasted suddenly like metal. "Crispin!" Garrity nodded slowly. "He was in maintenance yesterday asking where the ice machines drain, said he wanted authentic behind-the-scenes content for his socials.
I told him the back of the house is not a theme park. We call the sheriff, we keep it dry and neat, and we move the binder again, somewhere that isn't a safe with secrets a vendor forgot to close. I looked at Janice. She raised one eyebrow. Bank? I shook my head. Closed at night. I said Miguel's walk-in. Top shelf, behind the yeast bins, in a dry tub, double wrapped. No one goes into the walk-in unless they worship at his stove. Miguel's mouth was already set in a line that could hold a whole roof. I'll stand in front of it, he said, with a spoon. Get Everett back, I told Janice. Have him watch the footage with the sheriff, and Rhea gets a copy tonight. Theo printed stills, the cap, the wrist, the moment the black binder swapped, and slid them into a manila folder labeled with the cleanest handwriting this side of a Catholic school. We sealed the green binder in an opaque contractor bag, tucked it into a Rubbermaid bin lined with clean towels, and made our small procession through silent corridors. Garrity in front, me in the bin, Janice at my back like a second shadow. The kitchen lights were back. Miguel stood like a sentinel at the walk-in door, hand outstretched for the bin and eyes softening only when the latch clicked. Cold keeps everything honest, even paper, he said.
He left. The lodge put its shoulders back on. The ballroom carpets exhaled their ocean of captured water. Janice printed new codes and disabled every override this building had ever met. At 1 a.m, I finally let the night take me by the wrists and lead me to bed. 4 hours later, I woke to a knock that sounded like an old chapter wanting to be rewritten. I opened the door. My father stood there, gray in his beard, the boy he had been at 19 flickering in the set of his shoulders and gone in the next breath. He wore a jacket I remembered and boots I didn't. "Hi," he said, small in the way visits can make men. "Hi," I said, standing aside. "Come in." He looked around the suite, taking in the wood, the river stone, the little vase of wildflowers housekeeping kept filled like a promise money couldn't buy because it refused to be cured of its sincerity. "You did this," he said, without envy. "I did," I said. He sat on the edge of the armchair like it might decide to throw him if he relaxed. "Your uncle has been calling me since last night," he said. "He says you're being cruel to the family. He says you've made us look like fools." I leaned against the window frame. He tries to borrow other people's reflections when he doesn't like what he sees in his own. My father's laugh was quick and rueful. He always did. He rubbed his jaw. "I should have called you sooner." "You should have," I said. "I didn't pat it, but you're here now." "I am." He reached into his bag and pulled out an envelope thick with photocopies. He brought these. He spread them on the coffee table. Trust documents, notarized amendments, the family's particular brand of paperwork that always thought it looked more legitimate if it were an expensive paperclip. "You were a trustee," I said, scanning the pages. "Until 2015? He resigned. Or I was edged out, it depends who you ask. Richard wanted control. He always called me soft. Funny how that word means unwilling to lie in our house. He tapped a clause on a page with his nail. "Here. The trust has no authority to acquire or manage real estate without unanimous consent of all primary beneficiaries. He's been operating like it's a monarchy." "Noted," I said. He recorded a list pendants based on a memo with a dead notary and a misspelled name. His eyes lifted. Of course he did. We sat quiet for a minute. The lake outside was a pewter oval, the early light a rinse of gray blee that made even the trees confess their fatigue. He cleared his throat. "I wasn't always bad at being your father," he said. "Sometimes I was merely absent, which for a child is its own kind of bad." "Yes," I said. "He can testify," he went on, barreling into daylight, "to the way Richard runs the trust, to the way he uses the wrong name on purpose. He thinks it gives him plausible deniability while preserving the brand he loves in the mirror." He looked at my hands. "What do you need?" "I need you to sign a declaration, and I need you not to romanticize your regrets into advice." He smiled with only half his mouth. "I'll try." We wrote the declaration together. It was not a love letter, and still it mended something because we were making a record that did not require forgiveness to exist. He signed, I scanned. Rhea replied to the email with a one-word blessing. Gold. I closed my laptop and looked at the man who had left a Marlowe-shaped space in a house and then misunderstood why the cold came in. "Are you staying?" I asked. "If you want me to. I will keep to the edges. I will not interfere. I will show up when you point. You can have breakfast with me. Then we'll see." His face did something I have only seen on children who just want a small mercy. "Thank you," he said. It sounded like a first word. The dining room held the soft clatter of plates and the hum of civility that hotels bring out of people like a magician pulls scarves from air. Miguel sent out eggs the color of forgiveness and bread that smelled like someone finally got a raise. Agnes saw us and lifted her cup in a salute that made my throat warm. Richard saw us, too. His face flickered through 3 expressions in 3 seconds: surprise, disdain, calculation. He approached with the gait of a man who has decided to narrate history before it happens. "Brother," he said to my father, voice rolling in false fondness, "you made it. We were just about to start the family round table. Have it without me. I'm speaking with my daughter." His eyebrows rose to their favorite height, offended how Tur carved from money and habit. "We have business." "No," I said. "You have a habit of misunderstanding attention for business." I gestured toward the table across the room where reporters had tried to stand yesterday. "Not now." He smiled like a man about to throw a glass at a fireplace in a movie. "You think you've won because a temporary order dissolved. You haven't met Monday yet." "Monday can't wait to meet me," I said. "Now go sit down. Your eggs are getting cold." He didn't move. Something tightened in the air, an old rope between siblings that had dragged through decades and still had strength to yank shoulders. Agnes rose and placed herself between us like a saint in a painting dividing a fight with grace-made body. "Not here. Not at the table." He held my eye 1 second longer and then turned, throwing a smile over his shoulder at an aunt who couldn't stop fidgeting with her napkin. The room breathed again. After breakfast, I walked my father to the terrace. The day was a clean coin waiting to be spent. "We have to make a choice about the PR," Janice said, appearing like a truth does, at exactly the moment you run out of lies you can tell yourself. "The local paper's piece is scheduled for noon. They'll run whatever Richard fed them, plus whatever they think will get clicks. Then we feed them nothing they can chew on," I said. "Draft the statement. Eagle Crest Mountain Lodge is a privately owned business and is operating normally. We do not comment on family matters. We look forward to serving our guests."
The inspector's clipboards looked like little doors, and I decided I would open every one before anyone else tried to slam them on me. "Generator room first," the lead inspector said. His badge read P. Linton, County Safety. He had the precise, courteous energy of a person who knows people lie to him for a living and tries not to let it make him rude. "Right this way," I said, and I kept my hands visible, my voice level. Behind us, the news crew flowed like water seeking a crack. Janice stepped sideways, an elegant human dam, and smiled with all her teeth. "Media staging is on the public path," she told them pleasantly. "You may film the exterior from there. Interior is restricted to officials and guests." She said it as if offering a plate of cookies with a sign that read, "Not now." We moved down the corridor. Garrity fell in behind, Miguel at my flank, because chefs understand that safety is an ingredient you taste even when you don't see it listed. The generator room smelled of warmed metal and the ghost of cut power. Linton flicked on his headlamp, though the lights were back, and crouched to peer at the relay panel. "You've had hands in here," he said without judgment. "Facts first, scolding later." Garrity held up the plastic bag with the pulled relay we'd found tucked behind the housing. "We've preserved what we can. The jumper was still warm when I opened it." "Good," Linton said, making notes. "Good that you didn't put it back and pretend." He moved across the room, checked the vent clearances, the fuel shutoff, the governor linkage, every little place where negligence likes to make a nest. "Your maintenance logs." Janice handed them over. Signatures in Garrity's blunt handwriting, dates in an order that made even my breath slow down. Linton scanned, nodded once, and kept going. "Mechanical B," I said. "We had a smoke canister in the intake. We documented. Fire Marshal Everett inspected earlier today."
I've read his preliminary. He's on his way. He turned to me. You run tight. I said, we run a house. Houses get messy. We clean. He didn't smile exactly, but something in his shoulders said he had wanted to. He stood. Let's see the kitchen gas line. We walked. In the kitchen, Miguel showed him the brass valves, the lockouts newly added, the signs printed in a font that looked like it meant business because it did. Linton tested, sniffed, tested again. Fine, he said. To Miguel, your hood suppression is within date. To me, if anyone else touches a valve without your authorization this week, you call me, not just the marshal. I will, I said. Halfway through the tour, Everett arrived. Hat in hand, eyes already reading the room. Linton tipped him a nod that said professionals had met and liked what they saw. They exchanged words in that low, clipped shorthand you only learn by sweating in similar basements. The news crew tried once more to snake in, lens glinting. Janice was there, again, the way good habits are, a barrier that looks like grace. Public path, she repeated, pointing. You'll get your B-roll. They retreated, muttering about obstruction and truth, and filmed the pines with the same hunger they had hoped to bring inside. We finished in the ballroom, where the industrial fans still droned, moving air like tide. Linton stood beneath the gouged sprinkler head, reached up with a gloved hand and traced the mangled metal. Impact tool, he said. Not accidental. Somebody forced this. He looked directly at me and then pointedly at the hall where my relatives had drifted like curious moths toward any hint of heat. You have a camera here. I don't have a camera in the ballroom, I said, but the corridor, yes. We'll pull it, Everett said. He lowered his voice. You want me on site overnight. I didn't want to want it. Yes, I said, please. We ended back in the lobby. Linton closed his clipboard with a neat snap and met the camera's gaze. Not to perform, but to neutralize. This property is operating within code, he said. We've requested additional locks and signage on certain systems and have documented interference consistent with tampering by an unknown party. No public safety closure is warranted. He said it loud enough for the lens to catch, because even officials know sometimes the truth needs a microphone. The reporter lowered her camera a fraction, disappointment softening into acceptance. She could still spin a narrative if she wanted to, but not that one. She pivoted toward Richard, who was trying to look both present and blameless. Sir, she chirped. As a member of the Denley family, do you have a comment? Only that we want everyone to be safe, he said with the benevolent fatigue of a king burdened by peasants. We've raised concerns. We'll continue to protect our own. Thank you for your concern, I said, and slid the door closed gently after the last inspector stepped out into the night. Janice engaged the lock. The lobby settled into itself the way a body does after a cough. I turned to the staff. You were perfect, I said. Take 5, drink water, and then we reset the terrace for morning. Miguel lifted a spoon like a toast and then went to check on his walk-in with the discretion of a man who knows treasure when he stores it. Agnes squeezed my hand. You didn't let the camera eat your face, she said. That's a skill. I had a good note in my pocket, I told her, touching the paper she saved for me. Bank at 8. It felt like a door already open. The last hours of night stretched like linen pulled taut between two people who trust each other not to drop it. We made tea, not for effect, but because warm cups changed the shape of hands. Everett took a stool in the lobby with a stack of forms. Garrity did one more pass of every door, as if they were his kids and he needed to see them breathing. My father sat in a chair where he could look at me and nod at Richard. At 2, the lodge finally relaxed. At 3, it exhaled. At 4, it slept. At 5, it remembered it was a place built for mornings. I beat the sunrise to the bank. Janice and I drove in silence down the Martin Road, the lake beside us holding the last scraps of night like secrets it would never trade. The town waited in a hush. The bank manager who had met me at closing and called me ma'am in a way that had none of the frosting and all of the respect, unlocked the side door and took us into the vault. We signed the custody log. I placed the green binder inside a safety deposit box that felt too dignified for its cracked spine and sad label, and that was the point. We shut the drawer. The manager turned the key. I signed again. There is a kind of poetry in ritual when you're using it to hold off chaos. When we came out, the eastern ridge held a smear of apricot. I drove a little slower back up the mountain because there are things you should not rush, and light is one of them. The lodge awoke, the kettles sang, the elevators greeted, the lobby breathed espresso. Miguel's staff lined up utensils like soldiers who fight with butter. The paper I'd expected from the local news ran at 9:30, a piece with a bland headline, a photo of pine trees, and a sentence that read like a shrug. Our statement closed it out with grace. No oxygen for the fire Richard wanted. By 10, the sheriff's office called. Deputy Alvarez, voice even. "We pulled the purchase records on that relay tag," he said. "Hardware store in Port Ludlow. Buyer used a corporate card. Denley Media LLC." My silence said the thing it needed to say, so he didn't have to. "We also lifted a partial print from the safe panel interior," he continued. "Gloves sometimes leak when people get cocky. We're comparing it. We'll keep you updated." "Thank you," I said. The words are rope and a prayer. I found my father on the terrace. He had a mug wrapped in both hands, in a posture that had learned to make smallness dignified. "I'm going to the courthouse," I told him. "You can come if you want. You can also stay here and tell stories to children." He smiled. "I will come and keep my mouth shut." "Good," I said. "That's my favorite line in a family movie."
Good, she said. See you in 10. The county courthouse was a stubborn square of stone built when buildings wanted to look like declarations. We passed through the metal detector with a practiced dignity of people who had nothing to hide and less to prove. In the hallway, we found Rhea and Dev, sleek, alert, carrying the kind of bags that had paid for their own seats on planes. Anders stood across the hall with a man I had never seen, slick hair and a necktie fat with self-confidence. Richard beside them with an assistant whose entire face screamed hourly rate. Crispin was not there. That either meant cunning or consequence. We entered a courtroom that smelled of paper and wood and consequence. The judge took the bench with the kind of presence that comes from 30 years of watching people try to perform in a room that, by design, refuses theater. Cause number 25-2-14798, the clerk intoned. Densley Family Trust versus Densley. The irony is not lost on me, the judge said mildly, and a small laugh moved around the room and made a hole for truth to stand in. Rhea rose. Anders rose. I stayed seated and looked at the flag for a second, not because I believed in flags as magic, but because I like to remind myself that symbols mean exactly and only what we keep making them mean. The judge started without ceremony. "We have two matters, motion to expunge list pendants and request for sanctions. I have read the briefs. Mr. Anders, I'll hear from you first. Make it useful." Anders made it expensive instead. He spoke of heritage and family rights and equitable reliance, of a charitable impulse they had toward their wayward niece who had snuck an asset out from under them. He gestured elegantly, never touching the facts long enough to smudge them with truth. When he reached for the memorandum, the judge leaned forward. "Let's talk about your memorandum," he said, and his voice lost its bland. "It is facially defective, notary expired, misspelled trust name, wrong grantor, legal description referencing a parcel number retired years before the recording, no underlying right attached. On what planet do you believe this supports a lis pendens against this property?" Anders shifted to offense. "Your Honor, equity." "Sir, equity is not a license for mischief. Equity is a balm for injustice. I see no scalp wounds here, only paper cuts you inflicted yourself." He turned to Rhea. "Counsel." Rhea rose. I have rarely loved anything as much as I loved the way her voice slid into place between us and the bullet. "Your Honor," she said, "this lis pendens is a misuse of the statutory mechanism designed to protect legitimate claims affecting title. The memorandum fails at every threshold."
The trust lacks unanimous consent authority to acquire real estate under its own terms. The sellers executed no ROFR. The title company insured without exception. And, since filing, we have experienced interference. A pulled generator relay, a smoke canister and a mechanical intake, a vandalized sprinkler head. We have reason to believe, she paused just enough to keep ethics snug, that parties associated with plaintiff have attempted to create the appearance of chaos where none exists. We request expungement and sanctions sufficient to deter future theatrics. Anders sputtered about proof and coincidence. Rhea slid a sealed envelope toward the clerk. Evidence for in-camera review, she said. Security footage of a safe being opened with a factory override tool purchased with a card registered to an entity controlled by plaintiff's family. We are also prepared to submit purchase records under subpoena. We will avoid the spectacle of calling family in front of family if we can, but if necessary, we will proceed. The judge took the envelope without ceremony. He looked at Richard with a regard that had neither contempt nor sympathy in it. Only work. He said, "Lis pendens is expunged, effective immediately. The order will issue today." He turned to sanctions. "As for sanctions, I am inclined to award fees and costs associated with the dissolution of the TRO and this motion. As to additional sanctions, I will reserve until I have reviewed the sealed submission and the sheriff's reports." He glanced at Anders. "Counsel, advise your client to refrain from extracurriculars. I do not enjoy making examples, but I will. If relief were an animal, it padded up and put its chin on my knee. I didn't pet it. I just let it be." The judge looked at me, then, over his glasses. "Ms. Densley," he said, "operate your business. Don't take the bait." "Yes, Your Honor," I said. The gavel tap was light. The sound it made was large. We filed out. In the hall, Richard reached for narrative like a man drowning reaches for anything that floats. He said to my father, "This isn't over," because sometimes the only person men like him can see is the one they trained as mirror. "It is in this building," my father said gently. "Try finishing something else for a change." Rhea pressed my shoulder, brief and human. "Go," she said. "Go take care of the house." Back on the mountain, the world felt a half-inch taller. The lake wore a brighter coin. The staff looked like they'd slept at least 2 hours, which in hospitality is sometimes the same as a holiday. I gathered the team in the staff room and told them the truth. Expunged, fees, warning. The sound that rose from them wasn't applause. It was the collective exhale of people who had held a roof together and were being told the weather might change. "Lunch on me," I said. "I mean that literally. I'm working the line." McGill smiled, a small kingdom reveling. "You'll burn yourself," he said. "I'll love it," I said. For an hour, I moved behind the counter making sandwiches like a person who remembers how much kindness mayonnaise can carry. Guests thanked me without knowing the geometry of my morning. Kids smiled because sun and bread are reasons unto themselves. Mid-afternoon, Deputy Alvarez arrived with Everett and, unexpectedly, Crispin. He had a lawyer's card in his breast pocket and the look of a man who mistaken main character energy for a defense. Alvarez set a folder on the table. He began without the theater Crispin had been rehearsing for. "We have video of you entering the office and accessing the safe with a universal override tool. We have a receipt that matches the tool's relay tag to a purchase by Densley Media LLC, a company registered to you. We have stills of your hand with a distinctive tattoo the same as yours." He slid the stills across the table. "Would you like to explain?" Crispin blinked in disbelief at the discovery of a universe in which consequences existed. "I was checking our family documents," he said, "verifying the resort was compliant." He turned halfway toward me. "We didn't take anything important."
"You took something," Alvarez said. A tiny panic shivered in the edges of his smirk. "A vendor letter," he said. "Old, irrelevant." "What letter?" I asked. He lifted a shoulder. "A media release Whitcomb signed years ago. Something about permitting filming on site for a series that never happened." He glanced at the deputy. "It belongs to Densley Media." "It belongs where it was," Alvarez said. "In the archive." He waited. "Do you have the letter with you?" "It's being reviewed," Crispin said. He looked at his shoes. "By counsel." "Retrieve it," Alvarez said.
now. Crispin's lawyer, who had been practicing looking bored, leaned in and whispered something. Crispin sagged. "I can get it," he said. "Good," Alvarez replied. "You will bring it to the sheriff's office by 5. If you don't, I'll seek a warrant." He stood. "In the meantime, you are trespassed from all non-public areas of this property. Violate that, and you'll meet the holding cell that makes me wish we had better funding." Crispin glared at me. "You can't ban family." "I can protect my staff," I said. "And I will." He left with the deputy. Everett lingered. He looked at the ceiling sprinkler grid and then at me. "Any more surprises?" he asked. "Only the kind we make on purpose," I said. "We're throwing a cookout tonight. No gas, charcoal. You're invited." He smiled. "If you have pie." "Miguel?" I called toward the hallway. "I heard," came the response. "2 pies." I found Richard by the big window, staring out at the lake as if he could move the water by disapproval. Helen perched beside him, ankles crossed, fingers worrying a napkin into a regrettable geometry. "Expunged," I said. "You'll get the order this afternoon. Fees will follow, sanctions perhaps." He didn't take his eyes off the water. "You're cruel," he said. "I'm clear," I said. "There's a difference. Cruelty wants to see you hurt. Clarity wants to see you stop hurting other people." He did look at me then, and for a second, through the arrogance and the pose, I saw a boy who had learned that the only way to be safe in a house was to put everyone else in danger. It didn't excuse him. It explained the angles of his mouth. "Leave," he said softly. "Sell and leave. We'll pay you a return. You can buy something cute by the coast and pretend you won." "I did win," I said. "But it's not against you. It's against quitting." He made a face like he'd bitten a lemon and wished it were yours. "You'll regret this," he said. "I won't," I said. "Regret is for people who act against their own names." He left with Helen, brittle as glass. Agnes watched them go and moved to stand at my shoulder. "You didn't gloat," she said. "That saves the soul." "I want to," I admitted. "You're allowed to want," she said. "You're not allowed to act like him." We set the cookout for 7. The sky promised the kind of evening that makes people believe in postcards. We kept the menu simple. Grilled corn charred to sweetness, thick slabs of watermelon, wedges of pie that made children's eyes roll back like cartoon wolves. Before the food, though, I asked for 10 minutes. We gathered on the terrace. Staff took the front row by my insistence. Family found places and postures. My father stood 3 steps behind me, like a history I had chosen to keep in the frame. The lake held us in its bowl. "Thank you for your patience," I said. "If you're here, you've eaten grace you didn't cook and slept under a roof you didn't have to repair. This week has been louder than I planned. Some of that noise came from outside. Some of it came from inside. Either way, you've seen this place at work." I let my eyes find the faces I wanted. Sophie, who had told 3 different entitled men no with a smile they hadn't known could block a door. Garrity, grease still at the edges of his fingernails like metals. Leela, whose piping bag was a wand. Janice, high priestess of logistics. Miguel, the beating heart in a white coat. Everett, off duty, but standing like on. This lodge exists to make ordinary people feel extraordinary for a little while. Not because of marble or mountain views, though we have both, but because of care. Care is expensive, not in money, in attention. We will keep paying it. I turned to the family because I had to. If you stay under the rules everyone lives by here. No back-of-house access unless invited, no filming staff without consent, no touching equipment that isn't yours, no treating kindness as weakness. If you can't meet that bar, the guards at the gate know what to do. I didn't look at Crispin, though I felt his fidget reach toward me like a mosquito, needling for blood. I took a breath and spent it on a thing I had not planned to say. "I am starting a fund," I said, and heard the page turn in the air. 5% of every family reunion booking will go to a staff profit share pool and a local emergency assistance fund administered with the help of the county and fire marshal's office. We will name scholarships after the women who taught me to set a table even when we had to borrow plates. My grandmother and Agnes, if she'll allow it. Agnes made a small sound that might have been a laugh, trying to remember how. I am not performing, I said. This is a decision. If you want to put your name on something here, put it on your tip line. There was a quiet Jason-like stirring, the kind that lives between applause and thought. That was fine. I liked thought. Now, I said, eat. We did. Children ran in herds. Adults remembered they had knees and then forgot again. Everett had 2 slices of pie and pretended not to wipe his eyes. My father told a story to a small circle of kids about a mountain that learned to sing because a girl remembered to listen. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. Around 8, Crispin returned from town, pale and sweating, and handed Alvarez an envelope. Alvarez opened it, checked the letter, nodded, and then turned to me. Recovered, he said. We'll add it to the chain. It's irrelevant to your case, but it matters to the story. He glanced at Crispin, and it keeps him current with my patients. May I go? Crispin asked, brittle.
Alvarez considered him. Yes, he said. From this room, from this building, from this attitude, it's your choice. He softened his tone. Be smarter tomorrow. Crispin left with the particular grace of a fish thrown back into water it didn't deserve. The sun slid behind the ridge like a coin being saved for later. Lanterns blinked on one by one. The lake exhaled the day. Richard did not come to the cookout. I didn't need him to. Helen did. She ate an ear of corn with the seriousness of a person reconciling herself to the idea that things taste better when you stop pretending you're too good for them. She approached me before dessert, eyes sharp and dry. You've made a spectacle, she said. I've made a house, I replied. She looked past me at the staff. They like you. It sounded like an accusation and an echo of a longing she couldn't name. I like them back, I said. She breathed, long. I cannot control Richard, she said. I learned that in 1989 when he decided to pilot his life like a boat he couldn't dock. But I can tell you that he has new papers in motion. He doesn't know how to stop. I do, I said. He'll learn by imitation. She nodded once, a lady accepting a verdict from a god she didn't recognize. Take care, she said, and left. We cleaned in the way happy people clean, with jokes and speed and the small reverence of putting chairs exactly where the indentations in the grass invited them to return. The staff sang a little. Someone played a Russian waltz on a phone, and Miguel twirled a dish towel like a matador and refused to be embarrassed. At 10, I walked to the maintenance shed with Garrity to check that the lock that had failed before now bit like a jaw. It did. The bench in the lobby still hid secrets. The bank box number slept in my pocket like a spell. In my suite, I finally let the day show me the bruises it has left. I stood at the window and watched the water and the lanterns and the tiny moving lights of people who didn't know I was looking out for them, but would feel it when the hot water turned on in the morning and the coffee was hot and the towels were so white it felt like starting over. My phone chimed. Ria. Order entered, she wrote. Fees reserved for hearing next week. Sleep, if possible. I put the phone face down, as if that were a vow. Morning, the last day of the reunion, came like a curtain being pulled back. The lobby smelled of citrus and cinnamon. The elk looked philosophical. The weather promised to be unremarkable in the best way. We had one more thing to do. I asked the family to meet in the conference room at 9. I stood at the front with no slides, no props, just a stack of envelopes. Thank you for being here, I said. Today you check out. Before you do, check in. I handed Janice the stack. If you had an incident with staff, you will find a card addressed to you. It chronicles what we have on record.
It includes an itemized, polite invoice. Hands went up. I ignored them. If you tried to put bar tabs on the trust card, there is an itemized invoice. If you filmed staff without consent, there is an itemized invoice. If you accessed restricted areas, there is an itemized invoice. If you pulled a relay, there is more than an invoice. But if you tipped above 20%, there is a thank you note with a hand-drawn heart by one of the twins. I held up a final envelope. And if you saved someone's day, by opening a door, by sharing sunscreen, by telling a story that kept a child from crying, there is a note from me. The room murmured like a tree in wind. Tamsin opened her envelope with annoyance and then slowly smiled. Inside, a ribbon she had helped tie on a child's gift without being asked to. Dorian's envelope held a photocopy of the gas valve signage he had helped Miguel mount after the near miss, and a sentence. Thank you for helping fix a thing you did not break. Richard didn't take an envelope. He left it on the table like a gauntlet. That was fine. Janice would mail it. Paper knows how to make its way home. Checkout is at 11. The gate will be warm. The road will be kind. The world will be there. Good luck. They filed out. Some hugged me without asking. Some didn't look. Some put hands on staff's shoulders the way contrition sometimes tries to speak without words. Crispin avoided my eyes. That too was fine. Consequences don't require eye contact. At 11:30, the last car turned down the hill. The lake returned to a quieter register. The staff gathered on the terrace with the kind of giddy, decompressing laughter you only hear after a storm you've stood through together. Miguel brought out a cake. On top, in chocolate script, the same words as the first night,